Greetings. This is Addie Thanks, and welcome to Let's Talk Race Now, where we talk to people from all walks of life about their racial and ethnic experiences, their truths. I believe that everybody, regardless of social rank, position in the community, or ethnicity, must be heard in order for us to address America's race relation solutions. So let's talk race now. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Elizabeth McCullough. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Wonderful. A little about Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a Northern Southerner. She was born in Long Island and grew up there as an only child. Her early education was on Long Island, and she graduated from Brentwood High School. She attended Cornell University for 2.5 years. While contemplating next steps, she rallied around her family as needed and worked at various local jobs. A career in healthcare suited Elizabeth, taking advantage of administrative and teaching skills, and she was rewarded by helping those who were sick. Elizabeth met her partner in middle school, I believe, and this bond has made them the proud parents of 3 beautiful children, as she describes them, and I agree, that has allowed her the privilege to be a stay-at-home parent. They moved to Clayton, North Carolina in 2016. She brought her mother with her. Impacted by the game-changing George Floyd killing and activities around that event, Elizabeth founded the Racial Equity Coalition. We'll hear more about that later. In addition to being a beautiful, young, intelligent American woman, Elizabeth is biracial. She will share with us perspectives that most of us have not experienced. Again, welcome, Elizabeth. Let's discuss your familiars. Tell us about the world that you grew up in. How did you spend your time? What makes you smile when you think about growing up? Who were your friends and influences?
So, growing up, I had a great childhood. I'll just start off by saying that. I really did. When I look back at all of the things that were going on, things that when you're a kid, maybe you're not consciously aware of, or you don't really understand. There were so many ways my childhood could have gone left, and it could have not been what it was. So I feel very blessed and grateful for that. My parents separated when I was very young. I was probably around 3 years old. So to be honest, I don't even really remember a time when they were together. It was always normal for me that they were apart. One thing that I will always praise both of my parents for was that despite their struggles with their relationship, they kept that away from me, and they never made me feel like I had to choose a side. So that was something that I think absolutely made my childhood what it was that I never felt I had to pick one over the other. My mom was my primary caretaker, so I lived with her. I went to school, most of the year was spent with her. And then summers were spent usually with my dad and that side of my family. And just so everyone knows, my mom is African-American and my dad is Irish-Italian. So I would spend the summers with my dad, and we would alternate holidays. So Christmas and Thanksgiving, we would just alternate every year usually. So it's funny because when I think back on stories that I was told when my parents first got married, there was a lot of drama about the two of them coming together, and there was this fear that my dad's father, my grandfather, was not going to come to the wedding. And this all had to do with the fact that he was marrying a Black woman. So of course, this was all before I was born. but nevertheless, just so that people are aware, these things are real, and they happen even today. And I will also say, and my mom would have told you the same thing, there was a sense of relief when I was born on that side of the family, because I wasn't dark skinned. They didn't know what to expect, and there was fear there. So had I been a darker shade or just looked differently entirely, how would that have impacted my relationship with that side of the family? How would I have been accepted or not? I'll never really know. But it's an interesting component when you think about it. My dad, he loved all people. He would give someone the shirt off of his back. He was a humanitarian. He was a volunteer. He had a very gentle, very kind heart. And he loved being outdoors. So I would spend a lot of time outdoors with him, whether we were hiking or whatever we were doing. And so with him, it never really was a discussion that we had, the fact that I was biracial. That was more of a conversation I had with my mother, when I would talk to her about certain things that I would experience more during the school year. There would be things that would happen with my dad's side of the family where it's one of those things. It's that it's not that overt in your face sort of racism, like, where it slaps you in the face and you're like, oh my goodness, like, this is crazy. It was subtle. It was so subtle a lot of the times. And it's one of those things where when you're a kid, you don't know what's happening, but in your head, something's off. And maybe you feel uncomfortable. Maybe you're not really sure what to make of it, or why someone's asking you certain questions. Why there's certain assumptions being made about you. Things like assuming that because my mother was African American, that I was poor. Maybe that I didn't have money, or that I needed handouts and things like that. Issues with my hair, for example. So my hair is naturally curly. And when I would go with my dad, every time my mom would come and pick me up at the end of the summer, it would be a whole process for her to fix my hair, because it would be a mess, because nobody knew what to do with my hair. So, and then with my dad, it was probably partially because he was a guy, but you know what I mean? Even with my grandmother on that side of the family, she just did not know what to do. So it would be a big old rat's nest of tangles and everything else. And my mom would have to spend hours just detangling it. And in school, it always became a thing where I've heard people say this before, but if I were to claim I was Black, it was, well, you're not Black enough, so you can't really say you're Black. And if you're white, yeah, but you're not 100% white. Your mom is Black, so you can't say you're white. So you know what I mean? And that had to do, was twofold, right? It has to do with what I actually am, because I am biracial, but also how I look. Because I had a few friends who were biracial, but maybe they were darker skinned. They more obviously Black. They were accepted in a different way in certain groups than I was, and vice versa on the other side. So it was an interesting childhood. But I will say that my parents always made it a point to emphasize character over everything else. So I mean, I think that definitely helped me navigate some tricky situations while I was growing up.
Thank you for that answer. Yeah, it is so insightful. My question that you have partially answered is, how did people define you?
And even to this day, I often get asked the question, what are you? Especially if people meet me for the first time, where I think there's this, and maybe it's an American thing, I'm not sure, but it's like people almost can't get too comfortable around you until they know what box to put you in. You know what I mean? Funny enough, when my mom, when she bought our first house, and it was just her and I, we were in a community that was largely Hispanic. And I happened, according to everyone there, who just assumed I was either Dominican or Puerto Rican. And I did not know Spanish, at least not fluently. I knew a few phrases and a few words here or there. So there's this assumption at that particular point, and that was probably around middle school, that's just what I was. And a lot of people would just assume it and not even ask the question, because I guess, you know, again, I looked like a lot of other kids my age in that community. So as I've grown up and continued on with my life, that's still largely the assumption. If people don't ask, if they aren't curious and they don't ask, what are you? People will usually assume that I'm Dominican or Puerto Rican.
Oh my.
And,
How
you know, oh, go ahead.
How did you define yourself?
Well, I won't lie. I don't think as a kid, I don't ever think I had a huge identity crisis per se. But I know when we first moved into that house and into that community, I think there was something going on inside of me where I so badly wanted to feel like I belonged to a certain group just for the feeling of belonging. And at that point, finding a group where, even though I wasn't Puerto Rican or Dominican, I looked a lot like those that were. I remember going to my mom and asking her, are you sure? Are you 100% sure? Is there anyone in our family? You know, I wanted to cling to it so badly. I wanted there to be some truth to it, because then I would feel like I could claim it. But as long as I knew that there was no one in my family that was, that not even a little bit, then I couldn't, then it would just be lying. And I never felt comfortable lying. So after that period of time, which I want to say probably happened around middle school, by high school, if people ask me the question, and still to this day, I tell them I'm biracial, and I'll tell them my mom is Black and my dad is white. And that is who that is what I am. That is my background. And that's it. I don't think being one or the other, or a combination of the two, tells anybody anything about me personally. So I'm like, you know, if you're going to take that and assume certain things about me because of it, I mean, I can't really do much about that. But that's kind of where I realized my comfort was. Now, I know some friends of mine, again, who are biracial, who will say I'm Black or I'm white. And that might be for a bunch of different reasons. It could maybe partially be because of how they look on the outside and what they identify with, or how people identify them when they see them for the first time. Some of it could have to do with being ashamed. I mean, it can get really deep. But for me, I identify as biracial, and I'm very comfortable at this point in my life with who I am and all those parts that make me who I am. So
thank you for sharing that, because we all have had issues with fitting in, especially as children. And it is so much easier when we can define ourselves and fit into a niche. But when you're groping, then it makes it more challenging. I'm going to ask you a question now that I was going to ask you later on. How do you feel when people are looking at you and trying to figure out who are you, what are you, before they can respond to you?
There's been a range of emotions. When I was younger, it was more, I think, nervousness, maybe a little bit of fear. What are they going to think? You know, more concerned with what was going on in their minds. As I got older, it kind of evolved into a feeling of I would get annoyed, especially if what we were talking about or whatever conversation we were having had absolutely nothing to do with race at all. And I'm like, okay, well, why are you asking? Is it relevant to the conversation? Why do you need to know? Why is this a need to know thing? And now I would say for the most part, I don't really have any, there's no emotion behind it. And I tell people it's like anything. I tell them what I am, like I would tell them what my favorite color is, you know? And if they have other questions because of it, for the most part, I'm fine answering it. I've tried the approach of trying to shut people down, maybe being offended by the fact that but you know what? People are curious, and it's fine. And you know what? If they can learn something and I can learn something from this, and everybody is respectful, I'm okay with it.
Oh, thank God for maturity.
Right?
Elizabeth, what would you tell family, on both sides of your family, about Elizabeth?
So I actually prepared a little something because I was thinking about this the other day. So bear with me a second. You know, I was never super close with any one particular person in my family, or one side of my family per se. I would say that I probably knew my mom's side of the family a little better because I spent more time around them. But I guess what I would tell them is that I am who I am because of them, you know, the good and the bad, because of how I was raised, who I was raised around, and the experiences that I've had because of that. And again, like I said, both the good and bad, but I've seen ugliness on both sides. I've seen hate and fear, and I've felt at home and lost at the same time. And at different times, depending on what was going on and which side of the family I was with at different parts or different points of my life. I've questioned my identity, especially when I was younger, and how the world saw me, and I've dealt with insecurity because of it. All of this has taught me that I have choices to make. And that's something that my parents always encouraged me to do. I chose what to focus on and what to allow into my space. That was something my mother was always very big on. Whether it, you know, it didn't matter what it was. She said, you know, you always have a choice, even if your choice is only how you respond. So I would choose what to focus on, what to allow into my space, and how to use my experiences to leave this world better than how I found it. And that's what I want to do. So that's what I would tell them.
That's what you and that is an important message. Thinking back on the community that you grew up in, would you consider, thinking back, would you consider it a racist community, and why?
Oh, I grew up in very diverse communities. One community that I grew up in all the way up until 5th grade, and then another that I grew up in from middle school until I graduated high school. They were very diverse, but here's one thing that I will say. Racism and its impact on people is, it stretches beyond Black and white, right? So I grew up in very diverse communities, but communities that were largely people of color, okay? Very, very few white people, at least in the schools that I remember seeing. I could probably count on one hand the amount of white children that went to absolutely play out in different ways. Now, I will say that because of the diversity, there was also a lot of inclusion. There was a lot of growth, because when you're exposed, whether by force or by choice, when you're exposed to different people, different cultures, different traditions, different ethnicities, all different kinds of backgrounds, walls, I think, to a certain extent, naturally start to come down, because you can't ignore it. You can't ignore, and you can't be ignorant unless you're choosing to have the blinders on. You can't be ignorant of all of these differences around you, and you have a choice to either push them all away and create a bubble for yourself, or to embrace them and realize, you know what, we can have these differences and we can still respect one another. We could still walk together. We could still do this life together. So yes, there was racism, but there was also a beautiful acceptance and understanding that went along with that. So
I think that when we talk about diversity and when we talk about inclusion, and young people, particularly, knowing and meeting and befriending people of other ethnicities, there is a desire to begin there, to do healing, because you can't help hurt or hate someone that sat next to you in school and you played together.
right.
The problem, though, is that you can love them and still feel the same biases about everybody else and their race or ethnicity. So it's cut out for us, but that is a good beginning.
Mhm.
Did you personally experience racial discrimination?
Um, yes, and I did. In funny enough, from both sides, probably. So I had a friend. This was one of the first. It really shook me as I was probably in fourth grade, I want to say. I had a really good friend. Her name was Joanna, and she was Haitian. And we were great friends all through, first, second, third, fourth, all the way up to fifth grade when I moved. And there was another girl, and I can't remember her name. I can sort of see her face. She was kind of what you would call the school bully. That was just kind of how she was. But for whatever reason, this particular day, she chose to fixate on me and my relationship with Joanna. So we were standing online for something, I don't know what, and she just kept going on and on to Joanna, who was right in front of me, about, how she should be hanging out with her, and she needs to not even, why she's even talking to me. Why are you even, friends with her? Look at her, at the time, I wouldn't say I was one of the cool kids. I mean, I didn't like jeans. I would wear sweatpants because they were more comfortable, but she was using any and everything that she could find to, to kind of point and pick at me on. And Joanna was nervous and really didn't know what to say. And I started to get upset. And I remember her saying, you have to stop hanging out with white people. Yeah. But it's weird as a kid, now when you think of it as an adult, you think of all these things you could have said, that you should have said, that you would want to say. As a kid, you're just like, what do you say? How do you respond to that? And I remember that hurt me real bad. And I remember talking to my mom about it afterwards. But on the flip side, I had an experience with my cousins where I think we were at a summer camp, and my two cousins, Jennifer and Jessica, they were closest to my age, and we were at this camp, and I was not very athletically inclined. I'll just say that. And it was a very sports oriented camp. And we were doing a basketball session or something. And at the time I was really struggling, just trying to jump and shoot the ball high enough to get it in the basket. And we had been going to the camp for a little bit at this point, and this boy comes up to me and he goes, well, I don't understand why you can't make the basket. Black people can jump. Why can't you jump? And I was like, just, you know what I mean? These are the kinds of experiences that I would have where I would be exposed to these thoughts. It's like for a brief minute, you get a glimpse into someone else's mind, and you're floored because you're like, wow, people, even young, because this is as a kid, even these young kids, they're walking around with these ideas about people, these assumptions, whether good or bad, and these things are impacting how they treat others. It's just so far-reaching, and it's a little scary. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little scary. And that it, again, like I said, that it starts so young. It's not an adult problem. It's these ideas and these thoughts get passed down and become truth to these kids, to young kids, and they walk around thinking these things. So,
and they bring them into their adulthood.
They do,
and pass them on.
Mm-hmm.
How did the adults respond to your discrimination experiences?
Well, my mother was always the type to take the approach of, hate can't conquer hate. Only love can drive hate out. But at the same time, she wasn't a pushover. So she kind of taught me to, you don't have to respond to everything. Period. She was like, you don't have to respond. She's like, because you have to protect your own self, your mental state, your heart, and know who you are. She goes, but at the same time, you can't stay silent about things that you see are wrong. So I always kind of felt a responsibility to speak up if I saw something going on that I knew wasn't right. But I've been around other adults who very much are okay and promote the whole just sweep it under the rug. We don't talk about this, we don't want to stir the pot. We don't want to cause problems. We're just going to pretend that didn't happen. And there's a whole different range of responses. And as I've become an adult, those things still seem to hold true, that you'll find people that are on either side of the fence with that, like, let's face this, let's attack it head on. And others who are like, head in the sand, nope, we're just going to ignore that and keep it going. So
yeah, it's what we used to hear about everything you learned in kindergarten, and some people are still acting like they're in kindergarten.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Either or. Who are you? Which side do you support or speak for? That is our America. Let's talk about comfort levels in mixed and all Black environments. How comfortable are you?
So I'm personally comfortable in all environments, whether it's mixed or whether it's all Black. But again, that probably has to do with the fact that I was raised by my mom's side of the family. And, I've been in all Black settings many, many times, whether it was family functions, friends, my grandmother's church that I grew up in, largely Black congregation. So that doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. But what I will say, and it's something that I still struggle with to this day, if I'm in an all Black setting and the conversation is one similar to like what we're having or has anything to do with race relations, there's a part of me, especially if I'm with people and not everybody knows me and knows my background, to have to preface anything that I say by letting people know my mother is Black. Because the not knowing and it maybe not being obvious to some immediately changes the response from other people, not all, but some. The knowing seems to pave the way for certain comments I might make, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And to a certain extent, I do understand that. I do. I understand it. But it's something that I'm very aware of, especially if conversations drift in that direction. But generally speaking, I'm completely comfortable. I've no issues with it whatsoever.
It is the torch you have to carry.
It's fine.
And you carry it so elegantly. But my next question pokes a little further.
Okay.
Now, you have been privy to being in the company of whites who think you're white, and Blacks who think you're Black, and they're talking about the other race. What is that like?
Sometimes a little funny, sometimes not. Sometimes it's like any comedian. Let's say you go to a comedy show, whether it's Chris Rock, there's so many of them will make jokes that are race related, right? And their audience is a mix of people, and everybody will laugh, and everybody, so I've bared witness to that, where it's, it's like, okay, I see what's happening. But there are other times where, and Miss Addie, I'm sure you know this, where something is said as a joke and maybe some people laugh, but you very clearly see a line that's been crossed, or you see something where it's like, okay, I see what you're doing, but this is harmful actually. And whether or not you realize it, it's that feeling where you immediately, there's that gut feeling, this is not right. You know what I mean? And it was a challenge, especially as I was younger, and especially the first few times where I felt compelled to say something, because again, that's how I was raised. Because whenever I speak up, it's never with the intention of having a fight with somebody, because yelling and pointing fingers at somebody, that's not going to get me anywhere. I mean, if that's what I'm doing, I might as well keep my mouth shut, because I'm not going to change. I'm not going to educate them. I'm just going to upset myself. So whenever I do speak up, it's always gently, and with the assumption, until you prove otherwise, with the assumption that you just don't know. And I want to help you understand so that maybe you won't do it again. And I found that those who do want to know or want to do better are receptive to that. Now, those that aren't, it wouldn't have mattered what I said. They're determined to do whatever they want, regardless of anyone else's feelings or whether it's right or wrong. And you can kind of assess that fairly quickly. But it's made me grow, I think, a stronger backbone, being, certain assumptions being made about me in different circles. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it because in what I do, especially with the coalition, it's just another indicator, another reminder to me that this isn't behind us, that we still have something to fight for. Because sometimes you can begin to question. I think I made a post in our coalitions group not that long ago, that sometimes I get a little shaken and wonder, all this talk about race relations and racism and systemic racism and all of this, maybe it really is what some people say, where it's only still a problem because we keep talking about it. And maybe I need to stop talking about it, and maybe it's not really that big of a problem, but then something will inevitably happen where I believe it's God showing me, no, you're right, this is an issue. And some people don't want to acknowledge it or don't want to think it's as big as it is or as far reaching as it is, but there is a reason why you're doing this work, and you need to keep doing it. So,
That's right. We make no assumptions about what people know.
Right.
And therefore we have to start at A.
Yes. Yeah.
Given your experience thus far, what would you tell white, Black, and people of color groups about race relations from your perspective?
So I actually thought about this one too, wrote some notes for myself. So I think one of the keys to understanding ethnic relations is the ability to accept that our reality, my reality, the reality that Elizabeth McCullough lives in, isn't going to be the same as the reality that Miss Addie lives in, necessarily. I think we often walk around believing certain truths because they've been true for us and because of our experiences, and we assume that's the standard and it's the same for everybody. And so that puts us in a position to want to reject anyone who says anything differently. Mm-hmm. Because I think it all comes down to fear, right? This fear that if everybody doesn't experience life this way, then what does that mean? Then maybe things aren't what I was taught. Maybe things aren't as fair as I was raised to believe. Maybe not everyone has the same opportunities. Maybe not everybody, walks down the street and encounters other people the same way. And all of those things shape who we are. So I think humility is a big part of that. And I know it's something that whether it's race relations or anything else in my life is something that I is a constant work in progress. Walking in humility to try and understand that, that's the only way we can connect with other people, that we can not just, grow, but having that willingness to listen, because that was something else that my parents always taught me from a very young age. Communication is so important, but a lot of people think communication is talking. And the biggest part of communication is your ability to listen. Right. And I feel like, especially in today's world, so many people are just waiting to talk and not listening, not caring to listen. And sometimes listening doesn't always require a response. Sometimes it's just silence, and it's sitting with what was said and letting it really get into you, and seeing how it moves you, how it makes you feel, how, all of those things. And I think that's, no matter what your ethnic background, no matter what race you are, where you come from, I think that's something that we can all grow in, is that humility. And I think if we can come to the table with that, we'll have a lot more to talk about, and we can get a lot further as a world. I think that's a key component.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, because swallowing the food is not digesting it.
Yes.
And we have all been in situations where people, especially when we're talking about passionate, emotional issues, people lose track of what you're saying because they want to be able to get what they need to say on the table.
Yeah.
And the key is giving them enough opportunities for everybody to get theirs out so that we can communicate.
Yes.
I like the central feature of coming to that table with compassion. Because so often we see in race relations and discussions, you need to understand what I've been going through.
Yes.
You need to do better. You need to know this. So you're not coming with an open ear, but you're coming with an open mouth. And sometimes that gets in the way. And when we're looking for solutions, then recognizing what blocks solutions is so important. And that's why I'm glad that you are at the head of the coalition.
Oh, thank you.
And that leads us into racism in America. You were so impacted by the need to act after George Floyd's death that you founded the Racial Equity Coalition. Tell us about it and why you started it.
Well, so again, it did happen. I would say the events revolving around George Floyd were the catalyst, but more so even than that, it was my immediate community's response to it. There's a group that I'm a part of on Facebook. It's the Clayton Moms group, and there's a few thousand women in this group. And I was scrolling through it, I think a few days after the George Floyd incident, and one mom, just very basic question, she asked, do you think racism is a problem here in Clayton? And there were, I think, over 300 comments on that one question. And I just started scrolling through all of them, and I'm just reading all of these different comments from all different people, all different backgrounds, races, everything. And it was such a mix of responses. Some people who say, nope, not a problem here. Others who are like, well, I just moved here like 2 weeks ago and I've already encountered it. It was all over the place. And so to me, that indicated, well, we have work to do, right? Because if there's that wide range of experiences happening right here in Clayton, then there's something that we can improve on. And I wasn't really sure how to begin. And I'm trying to think, I think the first thing that I did was I reached out to our town council. I think it was just the first thing that I thought of. And one of our town council members, former town council member, Michael Granis, got in contact with me. He actually joined me. He's part of our executive committee now. And he was a great asset from day one because he was so well connected in the community. He helped make connections for me, told me who to reach out to. I had an opportunity to present at the morning Rotary Club here in Clayton, and then the midday Rotary Club. And at the time, you know, when something like that happens, when something like the unfortunate murder of George Floyd happens, you get a bunch of people up in arms, especially on social media. People begin to rally, and there's keyboard warriors. And I started a Facebook group and people joined. But then as time goes by, if nothing else happens or makes the news in a big way, people kind of quiet down. And you're left with, I would say, like the bones of what you started, and that's where I think the true growth starts to happen, where you're like, okay, the people who are left, these are the people who are really committed to this. So even though it might be a small group, I can work with that, you know what I mean, because we can build off of that. And we've done panel discussions on voting and racism in America. We've as you know, Miss Addie, I met Fred Foreman because of the coalition, and I didn't even know that his organization existed at that time. So being able to join him on his podcast, and I was surprised actually at the willingness of different groups within our community to listen and to talk about these issues, because I know they make so many people uncomfortable, and people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing. But right now, I would say our number one goal with the coalition is education. We don't want the conversation to die out, because the problem's not just going to go away because we stop talking about it. So between education, having these conversations, but also finding ways to expose our community to different ethnicities, different cultures, different backgrounds, in a way that is welcoming, in a way that's, okay, come, let's talk about this. Let's explain what this is about. Come experience it with us. Because again, it's just something that I've learned and I've experienced in my life, is when you take away the unknown, when something isn't unknown anymore, then it's not scary anymore. And then we don't have to have those knee-jerk reactions of, I'm gonna cancel this because I just don't understand it and I don't get it. You know, so that's where we are as a coalition right now, is working on building and creating those events in our community so we can bring everyone in our community closer together.
Oh, that's excellent. Does understanding the worldwide response to George Floyd that let us know that racism and ethnic relations and biases is so much more than Black, white, and America, has that impacted how you facilitate programs with the coalition?
Yes, so yes, I would say it does. I think so in our conversations, and it's not something we've dug into in depth yet, but sometimes, you know, it's like what you said, Miss Addie, when we talk about racism and its history in America, that's one part of a bigger issue, right? Because colonialism, colorism, and things that are happening in other countries are very real too. And even within communities of color, it still plays out in certain ways, right? And that's without white people. It's still playing out in certain ways, and there's still things that we're struggling with. So we've started introducing certain things that I think people of color have been aware of, but maybe white people maybe have not been so aware of, like the concept of colorism and what that means in communities of color. How colonialism has impacted communities of color in other countries. It's like a tree with a ton of branches, right? And it is far reaching. So it's a slow process having these conversations, because we don't want to just throw a bunch of information at people. It's overwhelming, as you know, because of your book. You know, it's a lot to digest. It's a lot to process. But having conversations in such a way where people are encouraged to ask questions, where they're not afraid of asking the wrong question, because we can't move away from ignorance if we stay silent. You know, so in the coalition, I never want anyone to feel like their question is stupid, or, you know what I mean? If we know where your heart is, and if you're coming to us, if you're part of the conversation and your goal is to learn, then I don't really think that there's a wrong question, just an opportunity to learn. So.
Well, that's a very good attitude. I always ask my guests, do you really believe that humans can overcome racial and ethnic bias, and why?
I think we can. I think we can because we created it. We created, human beings created the concept of race, and what all the meanings and understandings that we have of it, and what it's become today. It wasn't created for good reasons. It was created exactly for the reason and to have the impact that it's had. But I have to believe that if we caused the damage, we can fix it. I have to believe that. How we do that, how long will it take? That I'm not entirely sure. But and you know, I'm also a Christian, and I believe in God and Jesus and all the things that have happened in the Bible and all the miracles, and I have to believe that those kinds of things can happen. It's just going to take people who want to see it happen and understand that it is not, it is a long game that we're playing. It's not something, and we have to be willing to accept the fact that it may not happen in our lifetime. But if we're willing to do the work, and we're willing to accept the setbacks and the pushback and the hate that we're gonna get, but if we keep moving forward in love, and we can continue to move forward with that spirit of wanting to help others, then I think we can.
Excellent. That leads right into my final question. I asked my guests, what 5 things do you believe can impact improved race and ethnic relations?
Okay. I also took notes on this. So one thing, and I mentioned it before, is better communication. Communication, it really is a skill that has to be honed. And I don't think everyone understands that, that communication is really something that you're either good at or you're not. So yelling, lecturing, belittling people, which happens a lot on social media, that's not it. That's not, in my opinion, that's not effective communication. And like I said, it seems like so many people today are just waiting to talk and not really listening. That's the other part of communication. But having a desire to understand and to make a connection with another human being is a huge part of that. You have to want to connect with other people. So I think communication is one of the solutions. Another one, and this is specifically for what's going on today, is less reliance on social media for news and to know what's going on in the world. I mean, so Facebook came out when I was in college. So I grew up without social media, and how it's impacted in such a short period of time everybody is amazing and scary at the same time. But we live in such a fast-paced world, and we get easily caught up in wanting everything kind of gift wrapped and handed to us easily. And we thrive on these exciting and controversial headlines, right? We see a headline, and if it triggers us, then before we've even read anything, we're jumping on it, and again, keyboard warriors, right? Everybody, social media creates the perfect platform for everyone to get their opinion out there in the world. And instead of pausing and reflecting on what we've read, asking questions about what we've read, because just because someone published it doesn't mean it's true. We're already choosing sides, and we're ready to, again, yell at people and tear people down and have an opinion on something. Everybody's an expert now. And that's something that I think would help us tremendously is less reliance on social media in general. I think that would be a huge help. Community involvement, and that's something that I've been humbled by and learned a lot through starting the Racial Equality Coalition, is that it can be overwhelming when you try to think about how you can have an impact on the world, right? Like, where do you start? It's like, I'm just one person, what can I do? But when you look at your community and you think, okay, well, if I'm just talking about Clayton, North Carolina, that's not quite so scary. You know what I mean? I think I can figure out where to start. And that's how you can change the world. If we all focused at home first, there are ways that we can impact. And those are the people, those are the people that we have the most impact on. They're the ones that are around us every day. It's our community. So I think focusing on that, on the people that you share space with, allows for walls to come down, and for bridges to be built, and just for understanding and compassion to grow. A fourth one, and I know this is not popular with a lot of people, but I think we need to move away from this, I guess what you would call like a political correctness movement, but that's not me saying that I think we shouldn't be sensitive to the feelings of others. I 100% think we should be willing to learn from past mistakes, do better. But the part of it that concerns me is when we are so focused on political correctness that people are afraid to speak at all. Because again, they're afraid of offending or being offended. And when you are so afraid of doing the wrong thing that you're paralyzed, we can't accomplish anything that way. You know what I mean? We can't grow and we can't do better. So I think that there's a balance with that. I just know in the past couple of years, I've seen some extreme things happen where I wonder, is this helping or is this shutting people down and now we're not moving forward together? So that's one. The last one I would say is both focusing time and energy on the next generation, like we said, on kids, because, you know, some of us who are older, you know, some of us won't change. Some of us can, and some of us will be open to it. Some of us just won't. But children have this incredible capacity for love and acceptance, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity. That doesn't even factor in a lot of the time. And I think that there's something so simple and beautiful in that if we can cultivate that, if we can build on that, that's how that change that you talked about, whether, you know, we could ever really get rid of racism. If we have a chance, it's going to start with the kids. I think it really is. You know, there's a lot that we can learn from them, but to be able to nurture that and encourage it throughout their lives, that acceptance, that love, that judging people by the content of their character and not being concerned at all about the color of their skin, I think that's another big part of it. So.
Thank you. Those are excellent suggestions, and I can't wait to see them implemented, because, as you say, with the young minds, they come to us open and fresh. And one of the things that needs to change is reminding parents of what is said about other groups casually at the table in the car. Let's check our conversation that children are around and picking up what parents believe. And of course, yes, direct interaction and instruction. As you spoke, I thought about, you have had the opportunity to meet so many people in Clayton. And what always surprises me, and it's probably not good that it surprises me, is that there are so many wonderful people who are eager to do something to make the world better. Can you speak on that a minute?
Yes. So that's one thing that's been so encouraging since I started this coalition. Like I said, I was nervous for a lot of reasons. So yeah, there's so many people in the community who, given what I was trying to do and the controversialness of it, who welcomed me to the table, who wanted to hear what we were about, what we wanted to do in the community, and were ready to support us in any way that they could. And it's something that's kept me going, even throughout everything with COVID and the challenges with that. Sometimes what I've noticed is that a lot of people have the desire to want to help. They want to do something because everybody wants to feel like they've contributed something, they've left something behind. But I think, and I'm one of them, for so long, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I could contribute, what I'd be good at. So sometimes getting out there in the community, meeting people and gently, you know, kind of leading them like, okay, well, this is what we want to do. You know what? I've noticed you're really great at this. Would you mind helping us with A, B, and C? All of a sudden you see people's faces light up and they're like, oh my goodness, now my talents, I have a purpose now for my talents. My talents can be used. And I'm learning how to build on that because I love seeing people give back and feel like they're making a difference because whatever their gifts are, there's a purpose for them, you know, and that's what I've noticed in our community is there's a lot of people who are just ready and willing to make that difference. They're just, a lot of them are looking for the opportunity. So
who knew that in the radiology department, you would be honing administrative and teaching skills for healing that are evident today. Elizabeth, how can people connect with and learn more about the Racial Equity Coalition?
So right now we're primarily on Facebook, but we have a Facebook page and we have a group. So if you go to Facebook and if you search the Racial Equality Coalition of North Carolina or just of NC, it will pop up both of our page and our Facebook group. So you can make sure to follow us on our page and join and follow us in our group. We post weekly with different articles, food for thought type ideas, but we share also events that are coming up, ones that we're working on, but also other things in the community that we think our members would enjoy. And we will be working on an actual website soon, so we're excited about that. There's a lot of amazing things coming up in the new year. So please make sure to check that out and just join in on the conversation. We welcome everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for sharing your insights. And I believe it will certainly draw us closer to answers on race and ethnic solutions. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Race is personal. There is no way we can distance ourselves from how bias affects us individually. Herein lies the challenge for all of us to understand from outside our box. As we study biases based on other factors than race that result in discrimination against people not in our group, it reveals that forces are at work, natural to humankind, and created for specific agendas. Give that thought when you evaluate the world around you, seeking insight and answers about relationships. This is Addie Banks. Learn more at letstalkracenow.com and subscribe to the Let's Talk Race Now YouTube channel.